The man who had to die long before the war reached its darkest years, long before Europe became a map of fire and ruins, there existed a man whose name alone made entire regions tremble. Reinhard Heydrich. Tall, blonde, cold like polished steel, Heydrich was the embodiment of the Nazi ideology. He rose quickly, too quickly, through the ranks, commander of the SD, architect of the Gestapo, head of the WWII, and finally Reichsprotector of Bohemia and Moravia. The ruler of Prague. He was brilliant. He was monstrous. He was Hitler's favorite. And he was unstoppable. Or so the world believed. Because far away in London, behind encrypted radios and dim war offices, a decision had been made. Not a military decision, not a strategic objective, but a death sentence. The British Special Operations Executive, SOE, had chosen him. Heydrich must die, not because killing him would end the war. No, because killing him would tell the world something else. The Nazi elite are not gods. They can bleed. They can be hunted. They can fall. London searched for the right men, not soldiers, not assassins, men who could become ghosts. And they found two. The boys from Slovakia. Jozef Gabčík was not born a killer. He was a metalworker, the son of a family who believed in discipline, not violence. Quiet, dark-haired, calm. The type of man who could sit alone for hours without speaking. But inside him burned a fierce loyalty to country and pride. Jan Kubiš, on the other hand, was broader, stronger, faster. A farm boy with a stubborn heart, an instinct for survival, and a strange mixture of gentleness and brutality within him. They did not know each other before the war, but fate would bind their names forever. Both escaped occupied Czechoslovakia. Both fought in foreign armies. Both volunteered for dangerous missions, but neither expected what London chose them for. The SOE officer slid a file across the table. "Your mission," he said, "is Operation Anthropoid." They flipped the file open. A photograph stared back at them. Cold eyes, sharp features, a wolf in human form. Reinhard Heydrich. The officer continued, "This man is the most dangerous Nazi alive. Killing him will shake the regime. It may cost you your lives. Do not expect to return." No hesitation, no fear. Gabčík nodded once. Kubiš simply said, "When do we start?" The training of Ghost's Operation Anthropoid did not begin with guns. It began with silence. The British understood one thing about assassinations. A man who cannot control his heartbeat cannot pull the trigger when the moment comes. So the training was brutal. Week after week, they endured. Freezing night exercises with no sleep, hunger drills to simulate behind enemy lines, marksmanship from moving vehicles, knife fighting in darkness, explosives for street combat, survival routes designed to break the mind, interrogation resistance, including torture simulations. They were taught German customs. How they smoked, how they addressed soldiers, how they saluted, how they insulted each other, how they thought. They learned how to disappear in a city full of enemies. They learned how to kill in less than a second. They learned how to die with dignity. And then came the final lesson. In a dim room, an SOE colonel placed 2 small glass capsules on the table. Cyanide. He said nothing. He didn't have to. Gabčík pocketed his capsule. Kubiš swallowed hard, then did the same. The colonel finally spoke. "Your mission ends only one of 2 ways. Heydrich dies." The night of the drop of December 28, 1941, midnight did not come gently. It came like a blade of frost cutting across Europe. A Halifax bomber roared across the sky over Czechoslovakia. Inside, Gabčík and Kubiš checked their parachutes in silence. The pilot opened the hatch. Wind exploded into the cabin. Below them lay occupied Bohemia. Dark, frozen, silent. Somewhere down there was Heydrich. Somewhere down there was their fate. The officer shouted, "Anthropoid, go!" Gabčík jumped first. The void swallowed him. Kubiš followed. For a moment, they were not men. They were falling stars cutting through the winter air. Then, a violent shock. Branches. Pain. They crashed into trees, thorns, frozen soil. Their landing zone was wrong, miles off target. Worse, they landed near a German-controlled area. They buried their parachutes fast, camouflaged their bags, loaded their weapons. The temperature cut into their lungs. But they moved. Through forests, through fields, through frost that clung to their eyelashes. Hours later, shivering and exhausted, they found the safe house arranged by the resistance. A woman opened the door. Her eyes widened. "It's you," she whispered. "You've come." They nodded. "Take us to Prague." Prague under tyranny, the city was a masterpiece of stone, towers, and old beauty, strangled under iron and boots. German flags hung from balconies. SS squads patrolled with machine guns. Propaganda posters shouted loyalty to the Reich. Curfews, raids, arrests, public executions, and at the center of this terror stood Heydrich. He was not just a ruler, he was a predator. He cut rations to starved dissenters. He ordered mass arrests. He executed civilians on suspicion alone. He crushed resistance groups with chilling efficiency. To the people of Prague, he was death in uniform. To Gabčík and Kubiš, he was a target that must be reached. The life of the butcher, from the moment the operatives entered Prague, they studied Heydrich's movements. The man was frighteningly consistent. He left his villa at 9 a.m., he rode in an open-top Mercedes. He refused armed escorts. He followed the same daily route. He slowed down at the sharp curve near Bulovka Hospital. Why did he travel alone? Because he believed himself invincible. Because he believed the Czechs too weak to rise. Because he thought assassination was beneath him. Gabčík whispered one night, "This arrogance is our weapon." Kubiš nodded. "It will be the cause of his death." The wait for weeks, the operatives blended into the city. They changed locations constantly, memorized trams' routes, practiced ambush positions, rehearsed escape paths, timed Heydrich's car down to the second. They built a grenade, Kubiš's responsibility. It was modified to explode violently even if thrown incorrectly. Gabčík trained obsessively with his Sten gun. But he knew the truth. Sten guns jammed often. If it failed, the mission was doomed, but they had no alternative. This was their weapon. This was their fate. The decision, May 27, 1942. A Wednesday, the sky was cloudless. The wind soft, a normal day. Perfect for killing a man. Gabčík and Kubiš took their positions at the curve. They stood calmly. In civilian clothes, no armor, no backup, no escape plan that guaranteed survival. Just two men against the most powerful Nazi in Czechoslovakia. At 9:35 a.m., they heard it, the sound of an engine approaching. Heydrich's Mercedes, their heartbeats slowed, their minds sharpened. Gabčík whispered, "Ready." Kubiš nodded. "This ends now." The car turned the corner. Time froze, the kill zone had opened. The fate of two nations hung on the next 5 seconds. The sharp curve at the Bulovka tram stop was quiet that morning. A milk cart rattled in the distance. A tram bell echoed faintly. A woman carrying bread hurried across the street. Children laughed somewhere far behind the buildings. Nothing, absolutely nothing, suggested that history was about to bend. But two men stood calm and still. Jozef Gabčík and Jan Kubiš, their hands steady, their breathing controlled. Eyes fixed on a silent corner of Prague that would soon become a battlefield. Then they heard it, a soft, confident sound. The purr of a Mercedes engine. The car of the untouchable, the black Mercedes 320 convertible B rolled down the hill with casual arrogance. Inside sat Reinhard Heydrich, Reich's protector, the butcher of Prague, the man who believed no bullet could kill him. He wore his crisp, white SS tunic. His cap tilted just slightly, a riding whip rested across his lap. Beside him sat his driver, SS Oberscharführer Klein, trained, loyal, and armed. Heydrich himself carried a pistol. Of course he did. Predators always do. But he didn't need guards. He didn't need protection. Fear protected him. Or so he believed. Gabčík watched the car approach. He could hear his heartbeat now. But his mind was cold, focused, determined. This was the moment they had been building toward for months. The standoff, the car slowed as it approached the curve. This was the place. The perfect spot. The only moment Heydrich was vulnerable. Gabčík stepped forward. He walked into the road directly in the car's path. The driver shouted, "Halt!" Heydrich straightened, eyes narrowing. Gabčík raised his Sten gun. His finger tightened on the trigger. This was it. This was the shot that would change Europe. He pulled the trigger. Click. Silence. A dead breath in the universe. The Sten jammed. At the worst possible moment. Heydrich's eyes widened with disbelief and then with fury. "Stop the car!" he barked. The Mercedes screeched to a halt. The butcher of Prague stood up from his seat like a king rising to crush a peasant. He reached for his pistol. Gabčík froze for a fraction of a second. Just a fraction. But death lives in fractions. The bomb that saved the mission Kubiš reacted instinctively. His body moved before thought. He reached into his coat, pulled out the anti-tank grenade. His fingers ripped the pin in one fluid motion. He hurled the grenade toward the car, not perfectly, not cleanly, but with enough force to change everything. The grenade struck the rear wheel arch and exploded with a deafening blast. Metal tore through Heydrich's body. Shrapnel from the car frame shredded his abdomen. Upholstery fragments embedded into his flesh. A piece of the car's steel spring pierced his side. Heydrich screamed, a sound animal, raw, inhuman. The explosion blew Kubiš backward. Shrapnel sliced across his face. Glass ripped into his arm. Gabčík's ears rang. Dust and smoke filled the street. The world fell sideways. He blinked through the chaos. The butcher of Prague was down, but he wasn't dead yet. Reinhard Heydrich rises, most men would collapse. Most men would clutch their wounds, curl inward, fade out. Not Heydrich. He stood, bleeding heavily, face twisted in rage. Blood soaking into his perfect white uniform, he staggered toward Gabčík, pistol in hand. "You filth! I will kill you myself!" The street echoed with his fury. Klein, the driver, jumped from the car and charged toward Kubiš. Gabčík turned to flee. Heydrich fired. Bullets cracked past him. One tore through his coat. Another struck the cobblestone near his feet. Kubiš, blood dripping from his cheek, mounted his bicycle and pedaled hard. Klein chased him on foot. Kubiš turned at the corner and hurled another grenade, but it didn't explode. Still, it was enough to slow the driver. Kubiš vanished into the streets. The ghosts of Prague escaped. Gabčík sprinted toward a tram stop. A woman screamed as she saw the scene unfold. Bullets ricocheted off a metal railing. A tram conductor, terrified but brave, opened the door. "Come, quickly!" Gabčík dove inside, clutching the useless Sten. The tram pulled away. Heydrich stood in the street, swaying. Blood poured from his torso. His vision blurred. He dropped to his knees. The world spun. The air felt thick. His strength drained. He collapsed. The butcher of Prague had been defeated. Not by armies, not by generals, by two young men who refused to kneel. The panic began. Civilians scattered in every direction. Windows slammed shut. Dogs barked wildly. Children hid behind stone walls. Within minutes, German soldiers arrived. They lifted Heydrich's body. He gasped, "Find them! Find the pigs!" His voice cracked. He was dying. They rushed him to Bulovka Hospital. Blood soaking through the linen, pools of red trailing down the hallway. Doctors removed shrapnel. They stitched wounds. They battled infection. For days, Heydrich fought, but the infection was stronger than even his cruelty. He died on June 4, 1942. The fourth most powerful man in Nazi Germany, killed by a jammed gun and a desperate bomb throw. Hitler was enraged. The Reich strikes back. The retaliation came like a tidal wave of horror. Hitler ordered mass executions. Homes were burned. Villages razed. Civilians dragged into trucks. Anyone connected to resistance was tortured. The Nazis were not hunting two men anymore. They were hunting ghosts. Terror fell over Prague. No one slept. No one breathed freely. Every door that knocked felt death. Gabčík and Kubiš hid in safe houses. They changed hiding places at night. They whispered. They waited. But Hitler's rage was not finished. He demanded, "Bring me the assassins alive." I want them tortured until their bones turn to dust. The Gestapo swarmed the city. Posters appeared everywhere. Wanted. The murderers of Reinhard Heydrich reward. 10 million Reichsmarks, a fortune. Enough to make betrayal inevitable. The hunters were closing in. The first crack in the resistance one morning, at 4 a.m., a man knocked on a Gestapo door, his face pale, hands trembling, voice cracking. He whispered what the Nazis had dreamed of hearing. I know where they hide. And so began the final act of Operation Anthropoid, a bloody siege, a battle inside a church, and the last stand of heroes. But that is a story for part 3. Prague had turned into a wounded animal. Every street held soldiers. Every corner hid fear. Every whisper carried danger. Posters offering a fortune for information covered the walls. German trucks roamed day and night. Civilians were interrogated at gunpoint. Hitler wanted revenge, not a symbolic one, a biblical one. He wanted the world to tremble. And it was in this darkness that the betrayal was born. The man who broke under pressure, his name was Karel Kurda, a resistance member, weak-hearted, terrified, paralyzed by fear after the Nazi reprisals. He saw what happened to the village of Lidis. Every man executed, women sent to Ravensbrück, children kidnapped or murdered, houses burned, the entire village erased from the map. The message was clear. Give us the assassins, or Czechoslovakia will burn. Kurda couldn't handle the guilt, nor the pressure, nor the terror scratching at his mind. At dawn on June 17, 1942, he walked into Gestapo headquarters. He said the words that sealed his fate forever. I have information about the assassins. The room froze. The Gestapo leaned in. Speak. Everything. The safe houses, the families helping the paratroopers, the network hiding them, and finally, the sanctuary, a church in Prague, a crypt beneath it, a hiding place fit for ghosts. Kurda walked out with blood money in his hand and the stench of betrayal on his soul. He would never escape it. The church, holy ground, turns into a battleground. Saint Cyril and Methodius Church stood quietly in the heart of Prague. A beautiful structure of stone and arches, its bells silent under occupation. Inside, beneath the altar, in a cramped stone crypt, 6 assassins waited. Jozef, Gabčík, Jan Kubiš, Adolf Okoka, Joseph Bublak, Jan Hruby, Jaroslav Svark. They lived in shadows. Ate little, spoke softly. Listened the city breathe above them. They knew the betrayal was coming. They could feel it. Still, they prayed, not for themselves, but for the children in the streets, the mothers hiding husbands, the city that suffered because they had succeeded. Gabčík cleaned his Sten gun, ironic for a weapon that had betrayed him once. Kubiš checked the last of his grenades. His hands still shook from shrapnel. The others shared bread and silence. It was then that Opalka whispered, "When the Germans come, we fight to the last bullet." Gabčík nodded. "And after that," he said, tapping the cyanide capsule in his pocket, "we die on our own terms." The Nazis prepare for war inside a church. At sunrise on June 18, 1942, over 750 Gestapo and SS soldiers surrounded the church. Machine guns, armored vehicles, snipers, grenades, flamethrowers. The commander shouted, "Nobody leaves alive. They killed Heydrich. Today they die." Czech collaborators were dragged in to identify the entrance to the crypt. The church was locked from all sides. The siege began. The first attack, bullets in God's house at 5 a.m., soldiers stormed the church's main hall. They expected fear. They expected surrender. What they found instead was Gabčík leaning over the balcony of the choir loft, a machine gun in his hands. He opened fire. The sound shattered stained glass windows. Soldiers screamed, falling backward as bullets tore into them. Blood splattered on church benches. Hymn books flew into the air. Candles were shot off their stands. The holy hall turned into a war zone. The Germans scrambled behind pillars, returning fire. Bullets buzzed through the air, ricocheted off stone walls, chipped ancient icons. Gabčík moved like an animal cornered but not defeated. Reloaded, reloaded again, moved, fired again. The Germans tried scaling the choir loft. He dropped grenades down the stairwell. The explosions shook the church foundations. Soldiers were thrown backward, limbs twisted, screams echoing. The assault failed. They retreated. The church fell silent. Smoke drifted through shattered windows. Gabčík wiped sweat and blood from his face. He had bought time, but not salvation. The second assault, bring the flamethrowers. The Germans regrouped. The commander roared, flush him out. Burn the bastard alive. Flamethrower units advanced. The sound of igniting fuel filled the hall, a crackling roar of fire. A river of flame shot into the choir loft. Wood cracked. Heat exploded upward. The balcony caught fire. Gabčík ducked, choking on smoke. His eyes burned. His lungs screamed. He crawled on his belly, firing downward blindly. 2 SS men collapsed in flames. The loft creaked. It began to fall apart. He couldn't stay. He leaped off the balcony, crashing onto pews below. Pain shot through his leg. But he stood. He limped toward the crypt entrance. The fire raged behind him like the breath of hell. He sealed the door. The sanctuary above was lost. Their final refuge waited below. The Kronpt, stone tomb of heroes, the Germans surrounded the crypt entrance. They fired into the darkness. Bullets sparked off stone walls. Grenades rolled down the stairs. The assassins took positions. Bublik and Hruby covered the stairwell. Opelka commanded. Kubiš, wounded but ready, clutched his pistol. Svark held a knife in one hand, a grenade in the other. The first German soldier who stepped into the crypt received a bullet through the skull. He fell backward, crashing into his comrades. Another tried, shot in the throat. The stairwell became a funnel of death. The Germans hesitated. One officer shouted, "Flood them!" Buckets of water were poured down, but the crypt was too deep. Next attempt. Tear gas! Thick clouds of gas seeped into the chamber. The assassins coughed, eyes burning, lungs tearing. Still, they fought. Opelka fired until his magazine clicked empty. He reloaded with trembling hands. Gabčík's shoulder wound tore open, bleeding again. Kubiš faded in and out of consciousness. Grenades exploded in the narrow chamber, stones raining from the ceiling. The walls shook, but none surrendered. Final minutes. We will not be taken. The Germans changed tactics. They blocked the crypt entrance and began drilling into the ceiling from the church floor above. Debris fell on the assassins' heads. Sunlight broke through cracks. Soldiers shouted, "Surrender! This is your last chance." Silence. Then Gabčík shouted back, "We surrender only to God." Shots fired from below. A cloud of dust rose. The Germans prepared a final assault. But they never got the chance. One by one, the assassins turned to each other. No words, just nods, acceptance. They pressed their pistols to their temples or swallowed cyanide. Gabčík was the last. He whispered, "We have done our duty." A single shot echoed through the crypt. By the time the Germans broke inside, all 6 were dead, not captured, not tortured, not humiliated. Dead by their own hands, choosing dignity over surrender. The siege ended, but the legend began. When the gunfire stopped inside the church crypt, and when the smoke from grenades drifted away into silence, the Reich believed it had won. The assassins were dead, their bodies carried out like broken shadows. A holy place, stained with blood. Prague shaken beneath the boots of thousands. But what came next was not victory. It was vengeance. Methodical, monstrous vengeance, the kind only a wounded empire could unleash. Because Reinhard Heydrich, Hitler's beloved butcher, had been killed, and Hitler did not forgive, ever. The order from the Wolf's Lair on June 9, 1942, Adolf Hitler slammed his fist onto a thick oak table inside his headquarters. His face reddened, veins bulging along his temples. He shouted, "For every drop of Heydrich's blood, a river of Czech blood will flow." Generals stood in silence. He pointed at them like a curse. "I want terror. I want fear. I want something the world will never forget." His voice sharpened. Wipe villages off the map. Kill the men. Send the women to camps. The children, take them away. Germany will decide their fate. A single name floated through the room. Litis. The village marked for death Litis was a peaceful farming village. Fields golden with wheat. Small houses with gardens. Children playing near the small river. A place untouched by war until Heydrich's death. The Nazis blamed Litis falsely. They needed no proof, no justice, no reason. Just blood. In the early hours of June 10th, the SS encircled the village. Residents woke to barking dogs, shouts in German, flashlights shining in their windows. Men were separated from women. Boys pulled from their mothers' arms. Girls dragged by soldiers. The villagers cried, "What have we done? Where are they taking us? We are innocent." But innocence meant nothing. Not to these men. Not under this flag. The execution list at dawn, the SS commander opened a book. A list. The names of every man over 15. He called the first name. A farmer stepped forward, confused, terrified. They shot him. Then the next, and then the next, and the next. 10 at a time, executed behind the barn, blood soaked into the soil of Litis. 173 men were murdered in a single morning. Their bodies tossed into a mass grave. Their families forced to watch. The fate of women and children, 195 of them, were transported to Ravensbrück concentration camp, their heads shaved, their identities stripped, their fates sealed. The children, 105 little souls, were taken away, babies crying, boys screaming for their fathers, girls reaching for their mothers' hands. The SS officers selected a few with blonde hair and blue eyes, racially suitable for Germanization. The rest, 82 children, were sent to Chelmno extermination camp, where they were gassed. Their voices vanished into the smoke of history. The destruction of Litis, once the executions ended, once the mothers and children were gone, the Nazis turned to the village itself. They burned it. Every house, every barn, every tree, every memory. Then they bulldozed the ruins, flattened the earth. They erased Litis completely, as if it had never existed. Signs removed, roads rerouted, maps rewritten. Hitler wanted Litis to disappear from the world. But the world remembered. The message to Europe Nazi radio announced, Litis no longer exists. Fear spread across Europe like wildfire. Czechoslovakia fell into mourning. London cried out in horror. Even German citizens whispered, "What have we become?" But the outrage did not stop the Reich. It fed it. The other villages, darkness spreads. Litis was not alone. The village of Lazaki was targeted next. The entire village, men, women, children, all executed or sent to death camps, homes demolished, fields burned, life extinguished. In the weeks that followed, the Nazis arrested thousands, resistance members, sympathizers, anyone suspected of helping the paratroopers. Torture chambers overflowed. Prisons became graves. Gestapo files thickened with the names of the condemned. The message was clear. Resistance has a price, and we will collect it. The betrayer collects his blood money. Meanwhile, Karel Kurta, the man whose betrayal had exposed the assassins, received his payment. He walked out of Gestapo headquarters with a pocket full of Reichsmarks and a soul rotting from within. The Germans photographed him smiling. They needed him for propaganda, a Czech patriot who helped the Reich. But the people knew the truth. He was a traitor, a Judas. He lived in hiding after the war, unable to walk freely in his homeland. When the war ended, justice found him. He was arrested, tried, and executed. His name became a curse, a symbol of shame. The cost of courage by the end of the reprisals. The numbers were horrifying. 5,000 plus arrests, 1,357 executed, tens of thousands interrogated, villages destroyed, women sent to camps, children murdered or stolen, all because two men refused to let evil live unchallenged. London wept. Czechoslovakia bled. The world trembled. Heydrich achieved something he never expected. He made heroes out of two young paratroopers who believed that courage was worth dying for. The legend grows even under terror, Czechs whispered. They killed Heydrich. They struck fear into the Nazis. Courage lives. And in Prague, a phrase began to spread. They died so we could stand. The world had witnessed horror, but also defiance. The flame of resistance burned brighter than ever. Because even though villages fell, even though thousands perished, the right proved it could be wounded, and that wound would never heal. The smoke of Lidis still hung over Europe like a curse. The air tasted of ashes. The ground still trembled under the boots of German troops. The cries of mothers echoed through burned fields. But inside the marble halls of the Third Reich, something else trembled. Not fear, not grief, confusion. A crack in the spine of a machine that believed itself perfect. Because Reinhard Heydrich, the cold, brilliant mind behind the Gestapo, the architect of terror in the East, the man Hitler groomed as a successor, was dead. Killed not by armies, not by bombs, not by generals, but by two young paratroopers from a country the Nazis believed broken. It was unthinkable, unacceptable, impossible, and yet it had happened. The Reich, its brain inside the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, a meeting of the highest-ranking Nazis took place. The room was thick with cigarette smoke and tension. Himmler glared at the empty chair beside him, Heydrich's chair, Göring paced. Keitel rubbed his forehead. Bormann's lips twitched, hiding a smirk. Hitler stormed into the room, eyes bloodshot. "Explain to me," he snarled, "how a man under MI protection, the most gifted leader we had, was killed by two nobodies." Himmler swallowed. He underestimated them, mein Führer. "No!" Hitler screamed, slamming his fist on the table. "We underestimated them. We thought these people were cattle. We thought they were too afraid to fight." He spat the words like poison. "And now the world laughs at us." The generals exchanged glances, because deep down, they knew Hitler was right. The assassination had exposed a weakness, a flaw in the Nazi myth of invincibility. And the world had noticed. Intelligence in chaos, Heydrich's empty shadow without Heydrich, the RSA, the Central Intelligence and Security Office, was a beheaded beast. He had been the organizer, the strategist, the master of secret files, the architect of repression. No one understood of informants the way he did. No one could track resistance like he could. No one commanded fear the way he did. With his death, the Gestapo lost its compass. In Prague, officers argued about strategy. One demanded harsher measures. Another wanted to negotiate with locals. Another insisted the assassins must still be alive. Chaos, confusion, paranoia. Reports flooded in. Resistance activity increasing. Sabotage on the rail lines. Posters mocking the SS spotted in the old town. Workers refusing shifts. It seemed the assassination had awakened something dangerous, the unexpected effect. Courage returns to Europe. London received the news of Heydrich's death with disbelief. Churchill himself stood still for several moments, reading the telegram again and again. Then he whispered, "They did it. My God, they actually did it." He called the cabinet together and announced, "Let the world know Czechoslovakia has struck the wolf in its lair." Radio broadcasts across Europe echoed the message, "Heydrich is dead! The butcher of Prague is dead!" For the first time since the war began, occupied nations felt something new. Hope. French resistance fighters painted graffiti on walls. 2 men killed a giant. In Poland, whispers spread, "Courage is worth the price." In Yugoslavia, even the highest Nazis can fall. Even in Germany, quietly, secretly, some murmured, he was not invincible. The myth of the unstoppable Reich was cracking. The price of symbolism. Operation Anthropoid did not save lives. It did not end the occupation. It did not weaken the German army. But it did something far more powerful. It proved that tyranny can bleed. It proved that courage exists even in the darkest corners. It proved that occupied nations were not silent sheep, but volcanoes waiting to erupt. Propaganda ministers in Berlin panicked. They ordered newspapers to downplay the assassination, emphasize reprisals, portray Czechs as treacherous, insist the German right was united. But the damage had been done. In every cafe where civilians dared whisper, the story grew. 2 men traveled across Europe. They trained to kill the strongest Nazi. They succeeded. They faced an army alone inside a church. They fought until the last bullet. They died free. It was more than a mission. It was a legend. And legends spread faster than bullets. The hunt for sympathy. Germany's fears come true inside German headquarters. A new fear emerged. What if someone else tries the same thing? The paranoia grew. Suddenly, generals refused to travel in open cars. Officers tripled their bodyguards. Himmler ordered armored vehicles for his movements. Hitler restricted appearances, informant payments, increased propaganda campaigns, expanded Heydrich's death, planted a seed of fear in the Nazi hierarchy. They realized, if Heydrich could die, so could they. And once fear enters the heart of rulers, their power begins to rot. The symbol of resistance, the world reacts. British newspapers printed bold headlines. Nazi leader assassinated. Czech heroes strike back. The butcher of Prague is dead. American press ran the story for weeks. The assassination became a rallying cry for war support. Even Soviet propaganda praised the paratroopers, despite political differences. Allied morale surged. It seemed small, killing one man. But psychologically, it was colossal. The world realized the Nazi machine was not invulnerable. Its leaders could fall, its cruelty could be challenged, its power could be shaken, and it all began with a jammed gun, a thrown grenade, and 2 men who refused to kneel. The shockwave through the SS. Himmler loses control. Himmler, head of the SS, was shattered by Heydrich's death. Heydrich had been his right hand, his enforcer, his strategist, the architect of his empire. Without him, Himmler felt exposed, weakened, afraid. He doubled the size of his personal guard. He slept in different locations each night. He refused to travel by car without armor plating. Hitler mocked him for this, saying, "You fear shadows now." But Himmler replied, "Shadows can throw grenades." The resistance stronger in Prague. Secret meetings began again. Teachers taught forbidden Czech songs. Workers sabotaged factory machines. Priests spoke of courage in sermons. Teenagers painted symbols of resistance on walls at night. The Nazis crushed them relentlessly, but crushing bravery only spreads it. Even children whispered the names Gabčík, Kubiš, as if invoking saints of rebellion. The world after the assassination Operation Anthropoid triggered a chain reaction. Britain increased its support for resistance movements. The US used to justify stronger involvement in Europe. Underground movements grew across the continent. Nazi leadership became paranoid. Morale inside Germany quietly weakened. Hitler's trust in his officers deteriorated. Himmler became increasingly unstable. No single bullet had ever reshaped the psychology of war like this one. A death that echoed into the future, many historians later wrote. Killing Heydrich did not change the war. But they were wrong. It changed everything. It showed that resistance could win small but meaningful victories. It proved Hitler's inner circle was mortal. It kept the flame of rebellion alive in occupied nations. It inspired your assassinations and sabotage missions. It strengthened Allied morale at a crucial time. It planted the seeds of Nazi fear and internal conflict. Most importantly, it reminded the world that courage does not require armies. Sometimes, it requires only 2 men who refuse to accept the rule of monsters. Prague stood scarred. The smoke of reprisals had faded, but the memory of burned villages, murdered children, and shattered families had carved itself into the soul of the nation. Yet for all the pain Germany inflicted, for all the blood it demanded, Operation Anthropoid refused to die. It grew. It evolved. It became something the Nazis could never control. A legend. The fate of the betrayer. Karel Kurda. For a time, Kurda believed he had escaped justice. With pockets full of German blood money, he tried to build a new life, a new identity, a new version of himself. But he could not escape his shadow. After the war ended, Czechoslovakia wanted answers, names, confessions. People whispered his name like a curse. Kurda, the Judas of Prague. He was arrested, dragged before a court packed with survivors. Mothers who lost children, wives who lost husbands, villagers from towns burned. They glared at him with eyes that held the weight of graves. Kurda trembled. He stuttered excuses. I was afraid. They tortured people. I wanted to save my mother. I had no choice. But the world knew he had chosen gold over honor, fear over courage, betrayal over sacrifice. On April 29, 1947, Karel Kurda was hanged. His last words were lost in the echo of justice. His name would never be forgiven. The execution of another traitor, Vlastimil Moravec, another collaborator, who also betrayed safe houses, was also captured. His mother committed suicide from shame. He was executed shortly after Kurda. Traitors rarely survive history. Heroes do. The families pay the price. Many families who aided the assassins suffered tremendously. Entire households were arrested, dozens executed, many mothers sent to concentration camps, children taken and never returned. One heartbreaking case was the family of Jozef Gabčík's helpers. The Moravec family paid the ultimate price. The father was tortured until his heart gave out. The mother was executed. The son, Eta, only 17 years old, was murdered in Mauthausen. When Czechs speak of Anthropoid today, they do not speak only of the assassins. They speak of all who died silently in the background. Their sacrifice is part of the legend. The aftermath in Prague, a city changed forever. When the war finally ended in 1945, Prague began to rebuild, but the scars remained. Every street had a story. Every house had a secret. Every family had a loss. Still, the assassination of Heydrich gave the nation something priceless. An identity built on bravery, not fear. A belief that even in darkness, a small spark can ignite a revolution. The Nazis tried to crush that spark. Instead, it became a fire. The church, a tomb of glory, the church of Saint Cyril and Methodius, became a sacred site. Visitors walked in silence, touching bullet holes in the stone, staring at the burnt choir loft, feeling the weight of the crypt. Today, the crypt is a memorial. Photos of the paratroopers line the walls. Candles flicker in the dim light. A plaque reads, "Here the heroes of Anthropoid resisted to their last breath." It is a place where time stands still. A place where courage never dies. The global impact. How two men changed history. Operation Anthropoid influenced the world in ways unimaginable. It proved resistance movements were capable of major strikes. It inspired sabotage missions across Europe. It shook Nazi confidence at a crucial stage in the war. It strengthened British SOE operations. It told occupied nations, "You are not powerless." Historians later agreed. The psychological impact of Heydrich's assassination was greater than any military operation of its size. Not because it changed German strategy, but because it changed human strategy. People rose. People fought. People believed again. Courage spread like wildfire. Cold War era. Truth buried and reborn during Soviet control of Czechoslovakia, the story of Anthropoid was rewritten or muted. The communists did not like that London trained the heroes. They did not want Western glory celebrated. But the people remembered. Whispers continued in homes. Grandparents told children. The legend survived underground, waiting for the day it would rise. When communism fell in 1989, the truth rushed back like a flood. Anthropoid became a national treasure, a symbol of identity, a proof that Czechs had always resisted oppression, no matter the tyrant. The world honors their names. In 1961, U.S. President John F. Kennedy visited Prague. He placed flowers at the church. He said, "Czechoslovakia knows the cost of freedom and has paid it with courage." British and French leaders followed. The assassins were awarded medals posthumously. Streets were renamed after them. Schools taught their mission. Statues were built in public squares. Today, their images stand as reminders. Courage is not measured by survival. It is measured by willingness to sacrifice. Legacy: why the world still remembers Operation Anthropoid lives on. It was a strike against pure evil. It was carried out by ordinary men. It showed that tyranny is never absolute, that fear can be broken. It honored the human spirit in its darkest hour. In many ways, the mission created a template for modern resistance. Small teams, deep infiltration, precision kill, symbolic targets. Even today, military academies study Anthropoid masterclass in covert assassination. But beyond strategy, it is remembered for heart. Two men walked willingly into death to show the world that humanity still fights, that dignity matters, that even monsters can fall. The final word: immortality through sacrifice. Jozef, Gabčík, and Jan and Kubiš are buried far from the place where they fought, but their spirit lives in Prague. In the church, in the streets, in the memorial flame, in the hearts of generations born decades later. Their mission did not end in 1942. It lives every time someone stands against oppression. Every someone chooses courage over fear. Every time a small voice says, "No longer." Operation Anthropoid was more than an assassination. It was a message carved into the soul of humanity. Tyranny will fall, not by armies alone, but by the bravery of the few.